In the middle of a screaming evacuation on a distant planet, a 6-year-old girl stood face to face with a creature born to kill. Soldiers raised their weapons. Alarms echoed through the colony. But instead of fear, she smiled at the wounded dragon child and called it cute. That single word stopped a monster in its tracks and began a story that would change 2 worlds forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where you are watching from. Now let's jump into the story. The sirens screamed through horizon post like frightened birds, rising and falling in panicked waves that shook windows and hearts alike. Red lights flashed over the metal roofs of the small colony on Orion 3, turning every street into a river of warning. People ran, doors slammed, and voices shouted the same words over and over. Everyone to the bunkers. Move, move, move. But in the middle of all that noise, 6-year-old Nina Rossi stood barefoot in the soft dirt of her family's garden, clutching a small stuffed toy rabbit and staring at the dark edge of the forest. The sky above was a pale green, washed with thin clouds, but Nina wasn't looking at the sky. She was looking at the thing that had crawled out of the shadows. It moved slowly, like it was hurt. Its scales shimmered like wet metal, catching bits of sunlight and breaking them into tiny, glittering colors. Its long tail dragged behind it, and along its back were sharp spines that twitched with every breath. 4 bright eyes, glowing faintly gold, stared straight at Nina. Every warning she had ever heard about the Dravari flashed somewhere in the back of her small mind. Grown-ups called them dragon hunters, whispered about them when they thought children were asleep. They were supposed to be the most dangerous predators in this part of space. Soldiers came here because of them. That's why the sirens were screaming now, and yet, as the creature lifted its head and blinked at her, Nina did not feel fear. She felt curiosity. The creature was no taller than Nina's chest, still young, a hatchling. Its chest rose and fell in quick, shaky breaths. A thin line of dark liquid traced one leg where it had been hurt, but Nina did not see a monster. She saw something that looked very much alone. Behind her, the colony speakers barked out orders. All citizens report to the central bunker. This is not a drill. Dravari presence confirmed near the northern forest. Nina's parents didn't notice she had slipped out the back door. They were in the front room, grabbing emergency packs and calling her name, voices sharp with worry. But their shouts were lost beneath the sirens and the beating of Nina's own heart as she took one small step forward. "Hi," she said softly. The Dravari hatchling's spines rose halfway, a warning then lowered again. Its eyes narrowed as if it were trying to understand what this tiny soft-skinned creature was doing. Boots crashed through the underbrush at the garden's edge. "Target in sight," a harsh voice shouted. Nina turned just as a tall man in combat armor burst out from between 2 tree trunks. His armor bore the crest of the Colonial Defense Force. A name tag on his chest read Capt. R. Cole, but Nina didn't read it. She only saw the long rifle in his hands and the way his eyes widened when he saw her. "Kid, don't move," he barked, raising the weapon. "Step away from it." The Dravari hatchling hissed, spines shooting up, eyes glowing brighter, lowered its body, muscles coiling. In every training file, every briefing, this moment meant one thing: attack. Captain Ryan Cole's finger tightened on the trigger. He knew with the calm, cold piece of his mind trained for battle that he would not fire in time to save the girl. Nina did something no one expected. She smiled. She dropped her stuffed rabbit, clapped her small hands together and said with pure delight, "Oh, wow. You're so cute." The word hung in the air like something impossible. The Dravari hatchling froze. Its claws remained dug into the dirt, but its posture shifted. The cruel curve of its mouth softened. Its eyes blinked once, twice, as if it had been struck by a thought it had never had before. Slowly, its spines lowered, lying flat against its back. "Stand down, kid. Step away," Captain Cole shouted, panic edging his voice. Nina did not move away. She took another tiny step forward. "It's okay," she said, her voice as gentle as a lullaby. "You're hurt, aren't you?" The hatchling watched her. Its tail twitched. It opened its mouth, rows of sharp teeth showing, and made a low sound that reminded Nina of a kettle just before it whistles. "I'm going to call you Glimmer," she decided, "because your scales sparkle." Behind them, more soldiers appeared, weapons raised. "Captain, do we take the shot?" One called, "Hold your fire." Ryan snapped, never taking his eyes off the scene in front of him. You'll hit the girl. Nina reached out her hand, fingers shaking just a little now that she was close enough to see the small cracks in Glimmer's scales and the shallow cuts along his side. Captain Cole's heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to rush forward, grab her, pull her away, but every muscle in his body warned him that one sudden move might make the young Dravari strike. Nina's fingers touched the top of Glimmer's head. Instead of attacking, Glimmer let out a low rumbling sound. It vibrated through the air, through Nina's bones. It wasn't a growl. It reminded her of her neighbor's old cat back on Earth too, the way it purred when someone scratched it under the chin. See? Nina whispered with a smile. You like that? Glimmer's eyes half closed. The lethal spines along his back stayed flat. Slowly, carefully, he curled his body around Nina. Not in a trap, but like a shield, placing himself between her and the soldiers at the garden's edge. This isn't possible, one of the soldiers muttered. Captain Cole didn't answer. He watched, stunned, as the deadliest young predator in the sector chose to guard a 6-year-old human child. And as the sirens continued to cry over Horizon Post, something far more important happened in that quiet garden. For the first time in human history, a Dravari hatchling decided that a human was not prey, but a friend. The garden behind the Rossi house soon became the most carefully guarded patch of dirt on Orient 3. Within minutes of Captain Ryan Cole's urgent call, security teams, medics, and scientists surrounded the area. Metal barriers were rolled into place and scanners hummed as they swept for hidden threats. All the while, Glimmer stayed curled around Nina like a living wall of scales and spines. Marcus and Elin Rossi arrived breathless, faces pale. Elin almost rushed forward, but Captain Cole blocked her with one raised arm. Please, he said quietly, move slowly. Any sudden movement could frighten it. Elin whispered, staring past him at the coiled shape around her daughter. That is wrapped around my child. Nina's voice floated over the tense air. Mom, it's okay. Glimmer is nice. Marcus swallowed hard. Nina, sweetheart, come to us. Glimmer's head lifted at the sound of new voices. His spines rose halfway, eyes sharpening. Nina reached up and patted one scaled cheek. They're my mom and dad, she told him. They're safe. The hatchling's spines lowered again. He watched Elin and Marcus with bright, careful eyes, but did not move to attack. Instead, his tail folded tighter around Nina's legs, keeping her close. On the other side of the barrier, a woman in a plain dark jacket and tangled hair stepped forward, holding a tablet. Her ID badge read Dr. Hannah Ortega, Xenobiology. Captain, is this the juvenile from the reported nest? She asked, eyes wide with scientific awe. Same size, same markings, Ryan replied. I tracked it from the forest. Should have seen the kid as an easy meal. Dr. Ortega's gaze softened as she studied the pair. And yet, Nina waved cheerfully at the glassy eyes watching from behind helmets and visors. This is Glimmer, she announced. He's scared. And hungry. And also confused. You know that? Dark Ortega asked. Nina frowned as if the question were odd. He's telling me. Telling you how? Marcus asked, voice shaking. Nina tapped her temple with one small finger. Here, not with words, with feelings. An idea unfolded in Dr. Ortega's mind like a bright map. We need to observe this under controlled conditions, she said. And we need to do it without breaking their connection. After a long, heated discussion in the command center, a difficult decision was made. They would not separate Nina and Glimmer, at least not yet. Within hours, a reinforced observation room was prepared at the research wing. Its walls were made of strong, transparent panels, thick enough to stop almost anything, according to the engineers. Inside, they placed soft cushions, picture books, and a small table for Nina. In one corner, they set a wide, padded platform and a low basin filled with nutrient-rich protein gel for Glimmer, moving. Then there was the first test. No cages, Nina said, firmly when someone suggested a containment. Great, she's right, Dr. Ortega agreed. If we try to trap him, his instincts may take over. Instead, the plan was simple. Nina would walk with her parents and Glimmer would follow. In theory, it sounded fragile. In practice, it worked. Under the watchful eyes of soldiers moving slowly on all sides, Nina stepped out of the garden, one hand holding her mother's, the other resting lightly on Glimmer's head. The hatchling walked beside her, close enough that his scales brushed her arm, but far enough that the soldiers had a line of sight if anything changed. Whenever someone's weapon moved a little too high, Glimmer's spines twitched. Nina would give him a gentle pat and whisper something no one else could hear, and he would calm again. Inside the observation room, Nina settled onto a cushion with her stuffed rabbit, now a little dusty from the garden. Glimmer circled once, then lay down around her in a loose ring, tail wrapped near her feet, outside the glass. Dr. Ortega began her work. "Nina," she said softly into the room's speaker, "can you hear me clearly?" "Yes," Nina replied, looking up. "Glimmer can hear you too. He doesn't like the buzzing sound from your machines." Dr. Ortega blinked. "Tell him we'll try to make it quieter." Nina turned, met Glimmer's eyes for a silent moment, then nodded. "He says thank you," she reported.